13 months ago, I went to the Horseshoe Tavern in Toronto to watch a concert featuring the Filthy Radicals and a band from Quebec called Boyd's and the Dreadnoughts. A few nights ago, I went to the Horseshoe Tavern in Toronto to see the Filthy Radicals, a band from Quebec called Crash Ton Rock, and the Dreadnoughts. I've mentioned before that the Dreadnoughts are my very favorite live band, and so when I saw that show 13 months ago, I was blown away. It was so much fun. So a few nights ago, I should have had another really amazing concert experience, and in some ways I did have a really amazing concert experience, and in other ways I had a smack a guy in the head a couple of times kind of concert experience. The evening got off to a great start because I got to go with one of my very favorite people in the world, and so it was nice to get out to a concert with somebody that I love a lot. Now, the first band up was the Filthy Radicals, which is a ska-core band from Toronto who I've seen a couple of times, so I've had a lot of good things to say about them in previous videos. Now, I've never really been a fan of the whole junkie punk aesthetic that was popularized in the mid-70s by people like Sid Vicious and Richard Hell, where you sort of go to a punk show and you're just never quite sure what you're going to get, if the people performing are going to be so out of their minds on drugs that you're not going to get much of a show, or if it's going to be just a really great, solid experience. And to be fair to the one band member, he had just lost a very dear friend, so I don't want to come down on him too hard, but it was the type of experience where if he kept his mouth shut between songs, he might have been able to put on a pretty decent set still, but it turned into a situation where his bandmates were saying things like, his comments do not necessarily represent the views of the band, and so forth. So it's kind of a thing where, as a punk music fan, when I pay money to go see a show, I want to see the performers put on a good show and play great music. And it's disappointing when that doesn't happen, especially when you have seen them put on great shows in the past. I think that in particular, when you're a young band who's trying to get started in the music industry and maybe trying to get signed to a label, you do have kind of a responsibility to get up there for the 30 or 45 minutes you're on stage and put on a solid show, because you want to be noticed and you want some success, obviously, if you're putting all that work into doing what you're doing. I actually spoke briefly with the drummer before the show, and I'm not going to mention the name of the other band he was talking about, but he said that another band had come to Toronto in the recent past and they were excited to open for them, and they found out that they were coming back to Toronto again in the near future, and so they asked if they could open for them, and they were particularly interested because I guess that band's record label is a label that they're interested in signing with. But when they asked to open the second time, that band was like, F no, which isn't a great sign, although he put a positive spin on it, saying that as a result of getting turned down for that, they got to open for the Dreadnoughts, which, based on the other band he was talking about, I think is a much better show. But it's just the type of thing where you're like, you have the whole rest of the evening, when you're the first band up, to get as blitzed on drugs and booze as you want to after your set, but why would you do that before? And listen, I don't want to make it seem like I'm coming down on alcohol and drugs in any way. A shout out to chemistry for making our lives just a little bit more enjoyable. Thank you, science. I don't see the problem with a semi-responsible enjoyment of whatever you can get hold of. So, but at the end of the day, we had the best quote of the evening from one of the other band members who said, "Dude, you don't need to tune your guitar to play it badly." So next up was Crash Ton Rock from Quebec, and they mentioned that they had actually been in a van for 17 hours to get to the venue that day, and after that long drive were up on stage to perform their set, which kind of puzzled me at first because I had thought they were from Montreal, but I looked it up and it turns out they're from Saguenay, Quebec, which is actually 2.5 hours north of Quebec City or 5 hours north of Montreal, so it makes sense that it would take them 17 hours to drive to Toronto because that is way out there. But despite what a tiring experience that must have been, they just rocked it. They put on a really solid set with their anthemic singable songs, if you could speak French, I guess. They must have half the town of Saguenay in the band because the band actually consists of 4 guitarists and 5 singers, basically 1 lead singer and all of the guitarists who provided vocals as well. They actually outnumbered the Dreadnoughts on stage in terms of the number of band members they had. I do have a story about Crash Ton Rock that you will be able to see in yet another video that I can link at the end of this one, and it is that I think the last time I tried to see the Dreadnoughts is when I did the road trip to Montreal to see the show, and at that show Crash Ton Rock were opening for the Dreadnoughts. The problem is I got so ill on the road trip, I ended up with a high fever and just being deathly sick, that by the time I actually got to the concert, Crash Ton Rock were into their set, and I saw maybe 3 or 4 songs by Crash Ton Rock before I had to call it quits and get back to my hotel to crash. So I didn't get to see the Dreadnoughts that night, but I did get to see Crash Ton Rock perform 4 or 5 of their songs. They're not a band that I would necessarily just sort of pop on their music to listen to. It's not really the sort of gritty punk that I tend to gravitate towards, but they were really fun to watch and they did really put on a great set. Not a lot of chatting between sets, possibly because of the language barrier, and it was just one solid song after the other, so they did a great job. And then finally, it was time for the Dreadnoughts. Right off the bat, they seemed to be missing a bandmate. The accordion player wasn't present, so I don't know if he is still a part of the band or not, or if he couldn't make the show. They would have at least tied Crash Ton Rock for the number of people on stage had he been there, but he wasn't, so I'm not sure what was happening there, but the rest of the band was there and put on a great set, as they always do. Unfortunately, just maybe one song into their set, the bass drum broke, So about 10 minutes of their time was lost by trying to frantically track down another one of the bands to get their bass drum set up for them. And in the process, it seems we lost the traditional crowd surfing of the drummer to the bar and back, which is when they normally do one of their a cappella songs. They ended up doing that one while the drum was getting repaired instead.
Down, let's hear it! Rollin', rollin', rollin' the whole world round, back around, got our minds on the Georgia line, and we'll roll the wood pile down. I can't hear those feet anymore. I can't hear them. Maybe you should start hitting people. See if you can rhythmically hit each other. That's good. Very good. Okay. Yeah, listen to that skin. That sounds good. All right. Them Liverpool girls ain't got no combs. Way down in Florida, they comb their hair with a killer backbone and will roll the wood pile down.
But they managed to get everything fixed up and get on with their show. So I got into the pit there to do some active participation. And this time around, I thought what I would do is pull my bandana down over my eyes and sort of put my head down and go at it and let myself be pinballed all over the place. Which turned out to be quite fun for a couple of minutes, but then when I took it off again and looked around, I was feeling a bit of motion sickness just from the experience of being kind of spun and tossed about with no visual anchoring to keep my brain level, I guess you would say. So I felt just a wee bit vertiginous, but other than that, it was a fun experience in the mosh pit until, well, here's one of my pet peeves. It seems like in almost every circle pit, there are one or two people who stand at the back of the pit on the very edge of it, and then whenever somebody inevitably gets knocked into them, they just give them a good shove back into the pit again, and that seems to be their idea of participation. Now, I have a bad back from 16 years of putting people on 80-pound stretchers and carrying them up and down staircases and whatnot. And this one guy I got knocked into at the edge of the pit decided that he would give me an extra hard shove right in the middle of my back. He injured me in the process. My back still hurts. And typically what I'll do when that happens, when I get a particularly violent shove from one of these people, is I'll go back to them, sort of grab them behind the neck and pull them into the pit with me, with my line of thought being, all right, you want to participate, let's come to where you can participate, instead of just shoving people around from the sidelines here. But when I grabbed this dude behind the neck and tried to pull him in, he simply wouldn't budge. So instead I gave him two good hard smacks in the side of the head and then turned around and carried on watching the show there, which, while I was standing there with my back to him, I thought, based on the things I've experienced as a paramedic in Toronto, I could right now get knocked in the head pretty hard, or even in an extreme situation feel a knife in the back of my ribs, but that was just me being silly and overreacting because of the experiences I've had as a paramedic. And yes, you might be sitting there thinking, but Josh, you're at a punk show in a mosh pit. What do you expect? Just relax, man. And yes, mosh pits by their nature are very violent places, and that's what I love about them. But it's very much a controlled violence. And when people are trying to get in on that without being involved in it, it irritates the heck out of me. It's as if they went to a football game and stood right on the sidelines, and every time a football player came running by them, they just gave them a hit as they went by and didn't expect anything to happen to them in return. I mean, if you're going to participate, get in and participate. If you're not, stay back. If you don't want people to run into you, don't stand on the edge of a circle pit. Anyways, the Dreadnoughts were amazing. They were hilarious, funny as they always are. They put on a great show after their technical difficulties were sorted out.
Around the mighty Saturday, we ended up a the light is out, it's getting chill, gonna get the same.
Now, I know that the Dreadnoughts do have one song where they traditionally invite exactly 2 audience members up on stage for a little sing-along. However, please, inebriated concert goers, do not see that as an invitation to come up on stage anytime you like. We had one fellow who decided he'd try his hand at that little sing-along, and the lead singer, Nick, being the consummate professional he always is, sort of humored them a bit by allowing them to imitate a few sounds back and forth as a way of saying, okay, here's your participation, now time to get off. And then there was a couple other folks who hopped up on stage just so they could stand there and go, woo, for about 2 full minutes, thinking that they were the coolest to just be standing on this stage. And yes, there is a bit of a tradition within the punk rock genre of audience members hopping up on stage, dancing around for maybe 5 seconds, and then hurling themselves off in a stage dive back into the audience again. Or even, as happened with, just as an aside, I keep wanting to say the Heat Scores instead of the Filthy Radicals, because the Heat Scores were much like the Filthy Radicals in that they were a Toronto-based ska-core band way back from my time. Story time with Grandpa Josh. But yeah, the Filthy Radicals, who are a very small band, had a couple of their intimate friends who decided they would hop on stage and sing along for a chorus and get back off again. You kind of see that thing with the smaller bands who have their friends there supporting them. But that's not what I paid my money to come and see with the big bands like the Dreadnoughts. But the Dreadnoughts were amazing. They're incredible musicians, incredible singers. Every single one of them on their instrument are an absolute joy to watch. And then they're funny. They always are hilarious and put on a super fun show.
We sing so loud, we sing so proud, Mr. Allen Wade. The songs are lost, the beat across the deck side, faces pale.
But at the end of it all, I'm just like, what am I doing here? I'm in my 40s. Am I having fun? If I'm smacking people because they're annoying me, is that my idea of entertainment? Is it time for me to finally, after hundreds of mosh pits and punk shows, is it time for me to go into retirement from live music for a while, take a break? Maybe when my kids get to an age where they can come with me, get back out to it a bit. I don't know. Maybe I just need to not dwell on the negative parts of the experience and to focus on the super positive parts, because a lot of fun was had, and I don't want to let the negative things be what lasts with me after an experience like that. In any case, with winter approaching, I don't think I'll be getting out to any more shows until the springtime, because I'm a wimp when it comes to cold weather. I like to be nice and cozy and warm in my own house. So I'll probably take a break for a while. See what the future holds. Hey, it's Josh. You know why I'm here. Sometimes you just need that friendly reminder to give a little thumb up, to subscribe to the channel, to share the video with somebody who would enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers. Check one. 13 years ago, not years ago, months ago. That's a good start. 1 second into the video. Holy cow. This should have been an amazing concert because the Filthy, after seeing them just over a year ago at the Horseshoe Tavern, after seeing them a couple of years ago at the, and it turns out they're from, and then time in time. The lead singer, Nick, being the consummate professional. Story time with Uncle Josh. Story time with Grandpa Josh. But understand that just because you're drunk doesn't mean you're hilarious or extra awesome. So instead I just gave him 2 really hard hit